Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everyone. Today we're going to take a look at the full moon that is forming today in the sign of Aries, and we're going to take a look at Mercury entering the sign of Scorpio, where it is immediately making a square to Pluto, and this has a very interesting connection to our full moon. So we're going to be joining those things together today in a list of 5 things to watch for. I will also be doing some horoscopes for the cardinal signs because you're getting that full moon in one of your angular houses. And then I'll be telling you what is on my altar this week, as well as what else you can look forward to on the channel this week. All right, so that is our agenda for today. But before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe. Click that little notification bell for updates. That helps you to be notified whenever we have a new episode dropping or I'm doing a live stream or something like that. Share your comments. It helps the channel to grow. Transcripts of any of these daily talks can be found on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Now, a couple of things to promote. I'm going to go over to the website, and first of all, check out the speaker series under the events. We have one left in our speaker series. These are free events given by fantastic astrologers in the community. They are quarterly. You can always check them out on the page. They're always updated there. They're free to attend. Meg Freitag, who is our Year 1 and Year 2 course director, is giving a talk on Mercury this weekend. It's free to attend. You get the recording if you can't make it. So check that out. Go to events and go to live talks, and you'll see my talk for October is on the second house. All that grows in our gardens. We're going to do a deep exploration of the roots of the second house in ancient astrology. Where does this house come from? What is it all about? Especially if you're someone who has questions about things like business, money, assets, resources in your natal chart. This is going to be a good one for you. And then finally, go to the courses page. I'm very excited to announce that enrollment is open for our next Year 1 program, which begins on November 8th. Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology. It is a full year-long immersive program, 30 courses on the year. At the end of today's content, you'll have this informational video, which you can also find on the page, tagged on to tell you all about what the program includes. We have a really fantastic program that we take you through. In addition to the 30 classes that I lead on the year, we have guest teachers that come in outside of regular classes. We have in-depth tutoring sessions outside of our classes. We have a group forum discussion that's really lively throughout the year. Lots of bonus material. You can kind of go as deeply as you want to go, whether you're taking it for yourself because this is your hobby or just your own spiritual path, or you're someone who wants to practice for other people. This is really meant to meet people at the different levels that they might be at. At the bottom, you're going to find the early bird enrollment options, which are available until October 24th. So please do take advantage of those while they are there. You can also use need-based tuition assistance. So if you're someone who needs a little bit of help to make the program happen, maybe exchange rates are high because you're in another country, or you're in between jobs or on a fixed or limited income, we want people who really want to study astrology to not feel priced out of studying something that's sacred. That's been a part of our mission for going on 16 years now. So we've always had those sliding scale prices available for people who might be hurting or just need a little extra help. So please do take advantage of those. Come study with us. I am passionate about teaching astrology. It's really what I'm best at. So I hope that you'll check that out. All right. Now, on that note, let us take a look at this full moon. It's an intense start to our week, and we're getting closer to grand water trine season as well, now that Mercury will be moving into Scorpio today and starting to square Pluto. This is really the onset of our grand water trine configuration. It's a ways off yet, but everything in that grand water trine starts building from today forward. So in a strange way, this full moon is sort of ushering us into this very watery end of 2025. Anyway, let's take a look at the full moon. So here we have the full moon in Aries. It comes through pretty late tonight, Monday, October 6th. The full moon effects, I always say, when can you feel them? The morning of, the day after. You got about 2 to 2.5 days where you get the moon moving through a sign. A full moon like this coming off from the start of a cycle that was a solar eclipse is going to be a little bit more weighty than a typical full moon because it is in the midst of eclipse season still. It's not a lunar eclipse like we had at the beginning of September, but it is a full moon within a solar eclipse cycle. So it will probably feel a little extra. Now, some features First of all, moon in Aries, that's a Mars-ruled full moon. And what's really important to note is that the moon is in the bound of Mercury. Mercury is also in Mars's sign, now co-present with Mars in Scorpio, in Mars's bound, while Mars, by the way, is moving into Mercury's bound, and Mercury is in a square with Pluto, who's in Mercury's bound. I just think it's really fascinating to see how much that full moon really amplifies the Mercury-Mars dynamic. So that's just a very present part of the full moon. Mercury is immediately moving into a square with Pluto. Excuse me, that square with Pluto will perfect by tomorrow. It's already over. So it comes through today and has already perfected from October 6th, Monday, to October 7th, Tuesday. So that's why I said, this is a full moon in Aries in the bound of Mercury, with Mercury perfecting a square with Pluto at the exact same time, co-present with Mars, with a lot of Mercury-Mars themes in the sky at the same time. The planets speak in patterns through dignities, and the web of patterns will often amplify particular planetary combinations. So, for example, in this planetary combination, what I'm really trying to point out is what is repeating. What planets are repeating their presence to almost let us know, look, this moment is all about this combination. So the moon in a Mars-ruled sign in Mercury's bound, well, Mercury is in a Mars-ruled sign in Mars's bound, squaring Pluto, who's in Mercury's bound. Mercury's co-present with Mars, who's moving into Mercury's bound. You get the feeling, right? It is so Mercury-Mars. Everything is very Mercury-Mars dense. So that flavoring, a full moon in Aries, has to play a role in how we interpret it. With that in mind, what I have for you now is a list of 5 things to watch for today and tomorrow, especially given this combination. But you could very well see these things spreading out over a little longer period of time, and that is because Mercury is going to be moving into a conjunction with Mars between now and about October 19th. So over the next couple of weeks, that Mercury-Mars symbolism, so present at this full moon, is actually intensifying in its proximity through the actual bodily conjunction of Mercury-Mars in Scorpio, which at the end of October kicks off our first grand water trine. So you can see these arcs of story symbolically. Sometimes it feels counterproductive, honestly, to try and tell those stories in advance, but they give us at the very least things to pay attention to as the stories that we're living are unfolding. I'll say more about the connection between these events and the grand water trine as the month moves on. But today, 5 things to watch for given how Marsy, how mercurial, and kind of Plutonian this moment is. So here's the first thing to watch for. It's really simple. When you get Mercury squaring Pluto at the time of a full moon in Mars's sign, right? And Mercury, of course, is in a Mars sign, co-present with Mars, squaring Pluto, all of the things. Mental, verbal, emotional boil. You've got fire and water. And when those things combine, you usually get passionate intensity on the level of mind, thought, feeling, words, and actions. There's a great depth in the sign of Scorpio. There's a great depth when Mercury squares Pluto, but you also have the fiery intensity, action-driven impulsivity of Aries. And so a good way of thinking about it is like a boiling pot of water. That doesn't necessarily have to be violent. That can be an image of alchemy, of something cooking, of something reaching a point of transformation, or of going from something developing to something that's ready to be acted upon. So play with the image of boiling. Don't just think about it as danger, burning your skin, like it is an image that could, I don't know, it could provoke a little bit of fear, I guess. But the point is more about thoughts, emotions, mind, speech, reaching a point of action, a point of decisive change, where something that's been sort of percolating, the little bubbles rising to the top, is now rolling. So that's really what comes to my mind. And there's probably some history behind this. Remember that our moon cycle began with a solar eclipse in Mercury's not only domicile, but exaltation. And so mercurial things, mental things, plans, ideas, communication, exchange, currency, marketplaces, all Mercury ruled kinds of things are already on the table from the start of the cycle being so strongly mercurial. And now at the point of a full moon, we see that mercurial things are reaching a boiling point, a point of rapid communication, a point of greater depth and intensity, a point where mind and emotions are reaching a point of transformation, something that we've been thinking about and considering, or something we've been feeling, turns into the emotions turn into concrete thoughts. I'm feeling this way, and then suddenly I realize I'm feeling this way, and there's some rationale about what I ought to do. Or things that we've been thinking suddenly connect with things we've been feeling. Either way, there's a good image is that of reaching a boiling point. The other thing I would speak to here is just the potential for conflict. Mars is a sign that often speaks to things like individuality and individuation. And so while there could be an important moment of recognizing who I am as an individual, or how I am unique or set apart, or what separates or cuts my way from other people's way, that kind of unique Marsy quality of becoming more individually defined. That could be this, but Mars is also the god of conflict. And so the mental, verbal, emotional qualities of a full moon in Aries with Mercury squaring Pluto could be very much about conflict, mental, emotional conflict. And that turmoil could be felt within, but it could also externalize in the form of conflicts with other people. Mental, verbal, emotional conflicts are not going to be served by reactivity right now. And so whatever you can do to find outlets to sort of let the steam out, that's probably a good thing. It's like you want, when you pick up a pot or something that's boiling, you might need a hot pad so you don't burn your hand grabbing that pot. Those kinds of tools right now, mentally and emotionally, are probably going to be really useful. So keep all of that in mind. Number two is that, interestingly, the combinations of Mercury and Mars, again, so present at this full moon in Mars's sign, and Mercury's bound with Mercury square Pluto, Mercury co-present with Mars, are analysis, research, investigation, the penetrating, probing depth and intensity of the mind when Mercury and Mars get together, especially in the sign of Scorpio that likes depth, especially with Mercury and Pluto, which also like to get beneath the surface and find things that are hidden or unseen, or allow for things that have been maybe pent up to get out somehow. Like the destruction that is associated with Mercury Pluto is typically like an eruptive force that destroys as it releases, like a volcano. There's something pent up that's being released, and there's a natural expression of release that can be very creative. But often as the destruction comes and the creative force as the creative force is released, there's destruction that comes with it. So what I find interesting about this combination is that if we look beneath the surface of things actively, with an open mind, with curiosity, with depth, with a willingness to confront things that aren't always easy to see or talk about, or with an open mind and open heart to what may exist that we weren't anticipating, kind of free from too much attachment. Don't be too afraid, right? But go in sort of open-mindedly, open-heartedly. Then what we discover can be released in ways that maybe it's a little scary, it's a little stressful, but it doesn't have to be engaging us in massive power struggles, clashes of will and personality, egos, major clashes of words and thoughts, and I'm right and you're wrong and go to hell. And, it can go that way. But when we have a willingness to seek the truth and to hear the truth and to consider things that aren't always easy to look at or hear, this transit tends to be much more constructive. So keep that in mind. The other thing to consider is that this need for Mercury and Mars to get beneath the surface, for probing depth and intensity of mind, spirit, and intellect, is going to be growing over the course of the month of October. This is just the starting point. Mercury squares Pluto, and we have a full moon in Mars' sign, and Mercury and Mars will actually come together by the 19th of October. So this may also start a process of getting beneath the surface, looking more deeply behind or within things. It's like maybe the outset of an investigative journalist's research project. So keep that in mind, that going deep and probing and getting into the unconscious, the subterranean, the underworld, and seeking truth with an open mind, being careful of reactivity, those are going to be the best ways to navigate these forces. Number 3, messages from the underworld. It's remarkable to me how anytime that Mercury and Pluto get together, especially in the hard aspects, things that need to be conveyed or communicated as a force of transformation, evolution, the sort of necessity of yeah, let's just call it the force of necessity itself, of destiny, but that sense of like, this is hard, but it somehow needs to be done. Or things that have to happen, but we sort of can't fathom why. Mercury and Pluto often defy conventional logic and make us consider the necessity of things that we can't find a logical place for, but somehow exist. Look at the natural world, look at some of the sort of predatorial, bloody aspects of nature. And it's sort of like, why does this have to be a part of it? Mercury and Pluto together often put us in touch with things that are subterranean and a part of life in the cosmos, but not the easy parts that we have quick answers for. So sometimes messages from that level of things come through, the things that we have a harder time finding a place for. Mercury and Pluto can also speak to messages from ancestors, messages in dreams, or from the dead, or from spirits. Mercury and Pluto can speak to intuition and almost like a kind of psychic receptivity that can be activated, or even things like precognition, deja vu, strange mental phenomenon that come up and have an ominous but creative presence in our psyches. So I would watch for this distinctly here at the beginning of the week, but also as an ongoing phenomenon between now and October 19th, as Mercury and Mars and Scorpio continue their move together. Number 4, I would be very careful during a full moon like this, given that boiling point message from the underworld, Plutonian influence, the things that exist below the surface of a kind of ruthless bottom line executive mindset. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you want. This is the bottom line. I'm like enactments of mental and emotional bullying or power are not uncommon for a combination like this. A full moon in Mars' sign with, moon in the bound of Mercury and Mercury squaring Pluto in Aquarius feels like it could be very cutthroat and dehumanizing and impersonal. And when we start, for example, when we see beneath the facade or the veneer of civilization into the ruthlessness of how certain things are run or operated, and it hits the news and everyone sees, oh my God, here's this, it's a, what it reminds me of is, do you guys ever remember that show House of Cards? I think it was with it was Kevin Spacey and I'm trying to remember, Robin Wright Penn maybe was her name. I can't remember. Anyway, on the outside, they're like all Southern charming politicians, they're really ruthless when you get beneath the surface. So one of the things that can come about, we can get some sense of our own ruthlessness, of our own bottom line reductive thinking. And sometimes we need to be reminded of that we're not necessarily above that. Anytime that I come in touch with that part of myself, I kind of am like, oh shit, like I have that in me. I have to be careful. I'm not, just because I know it's not good or moral or virtuous to be that way doesn't mean that I am not tempted to be that way and sometimes act that way in relationships or decision making or with myself, how I speak to myself internally. Um, those those voices are perennial and archetypal. They're not really good or bad in the largest sense of reality because they're real. So they serve a purpose, but one that I feel like it's much better if we're consciously aware of those forces, that kind of like executive, impersonal, kind of bottom line. Sometimes we need to have a bottom line with ourselves to keep things going or to stay disciplined or focused or to get something done when we're lacking motivation. And some of that might be available to us right now. Wouldn't that be nice if we need a little extra motivation and someone's there to say, look, your feelings don't matter so much right now. You need to just get shit done, like, and set it aside and come back to it later. Mercury and Scorpio square Pluto and Aquarius can see the advantage of temporarily just setting aside squishy neediness. you know, maybe that's needed for a moment, but also be really careful of the kind of ruthless bottom line thinking. And it wouldn't be surprising to see some things sort of come to the surface or exposed behind the scenes, where something that's made to look nice is that there's actually something a little bit more ruthless going on beneath the surface. Becoming aware of that, especially within our own like inner committee and dialogue, can be really useful, because it's almost always better if those voices within ourselves are repurposed to tasks that do not involve estimations of our value or worth. Because they're kind of those voices tend to be very like, well, your worth is tantamount to your production, or stuff like that. So all right, finally, plans, strategies, tactics, and persuasion. This is a full moon in Aries. It's very action oriented, could be very impulsive, maybe a little bit selfish. Aries can be a little like childishly selfish at times, and only think in terms of what I'm doing next, what I'm doing now, and be a little like restless and constantly in motion. But what's nice about this full moon in Aries is that it's in the bound of Mercury. Mercury's squaring Pluto. Mercury's with Mars in Scorpio. There's so much tact and strategy and careful thought and depth and investigation and probing and looking beneath the surface. That these combinations, Mercury, Mars, and Scorpio, Mercury square Pluto, they're very measured and calculated and even cunning. And so on the surface, if Aries needs to do something, start a new project, start a new company, start a new product line or something like that in your work, or maybe initiate something new within a relationship. What's so beneficial about this full moon is the care, tact, thoughtfulness, depth, strategy, mentally and emotionally, that's available for a full moon that could otherwise be a little impulsive and maybe shallow, insofar as Aries does not always or can lack relational and diplomatic sensitivities mentally and emotionally. That's not meant to say that like Aries are dumb or something like that. It's just what Aries is strong at is not necessarily the opposite Libran qualities of social calculus. But this Mercury Mars dynamic with Mercury square Pluto and Aquarius has a lot more social tact, in addition to having that strong sense of urgency or action, like let's do something. So anyway, I hope that this has been useful. Watch for the tactician, the planning, the strategy. Watch maybe a little bit for those things being paired with some kind of ruthless bottom line thinking. But what a unique full moon moment. I'm really curious to see how this week will play out. I always create these in advance. So when I'll re-listen to them when they're actually happening, and then I'm always kind of surprised to see how it's reflecting and actually showing up in my life at the time that it is published. All right. Well, we have a lot of really interesting astrology ahead of us this week. So let me just. We have a little later in the week. We have a little Venus sextile. Let me go back here. I'm going to put this up on the screen. I'm just going to show you a few other transits that are coming this week that I here we go. Okay. So one thing that's coming later in the week, we got a little sextile between the benefics. That's nice. A little whenever the benefics come together in a trine or a sextile, it's like a little padding that you'll experience, like a little spot of good fortune or nice positive connectivity. So I like that. Just a little aspect coming through this week that perfects. Really, you'll experience it tomorrow, October 7th, Wednesday, October 8th. And then later in the week, what we're going to be focused on is the opposition that's forming this week between Venus and Saturn. That comes a lot later in the week. So we're talking about Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that those two planets will form the opposition to one another. And this also brings Venus through the degree of the eclipse within just a few days of the start of next week. We've talked a little bit already about Venus as she went across the South Node. Last week we looked at that, or it was 2 weeks ago now. So Venus coming through the opposition to Saturn will form some of the work that we do on the channel later in the week. We might hit up the little mention of Venus and Jupiter. The other thing that is, taking place really soon is Pluto stationing and turning direct. That's going to be happening by next week. So I have thought about maybe doing some horoscopes to refresh and remind us of the journey that Pluto in Aquarius has been on. So I think that'll probably come into the channel later this week. But anyway, that's it. What I want to do now are just some brief horoscopes for the cardinal signs, just reminding you of where this full moon is going to be taking place. So let me, here we go. Get it geared up here. All right, so if you are a cardinal rising sign, you're getting this full moon in one of your angular houses. And I like to highlight that angularity at the start of the week for my whatever signs are receiving it. So if you're an Aries rising, you're getting this in the first house. This full moon is so much to do with self, identity, health of the body, vitality, appearance in the world, character, and the evolution or unfolding of your sense of who you are and what really makes you, you. And that is a process of continual refinement that the first house refers to in a full moon like this, will certainly be considering. Now, at the same time, that Mercury square to Pluto across the 8th and the 11th likely means that the process of individuation is coming in through the space of social or professional groups, colleagues, allies, and the contracts that you have with various people and how they tie you to various groups, and what is making sense for you on that level and what isn't. Let's go forward now to our next cardinal sign. That's going to be Cancer. Your full moon is taking place. The full moon is taking place in your 10th house, which is the place of career, your public facing identity, your reputation in the world, maybe your vocation. If you're retired, this could be a place that simply engages you in the social or civic arena in whatever way you're engaged at this stage of life. But the emphasis here is on a turning point or a tipping point with respect to career activity, focus, and direction. Now, on the secondary level, the square between Mercury and Pluto in the 5th and the 8th might speak to things like creativity and social inhibitions. When these two planets get together, I really think of where there needs to be greater creative expression and release, but what kinds of social forces may repress or hold you back, or what are you having to face or speak as potential fears of social feedback or pushback. What kinds of allegiances or responsibilities do you feel like you have to various collectives, and how does that inform how you express or communicate or convey yourself creatively? I can see those things being very important for Cancers right now. Let's go forward to Libras, where we see this full moon forming in your 7th house. That's going to be the place of love and relationships, interpersonal dynamics, pleasure, sexuality, marriage. a full moon there suggests a moment of culmination, completion, harvesting, learning, a kind of peak moment within the sphere or realm of relationships, or more broadly speaking, however you define pleasure with other human beings. Or remember, that house is called a Kama house, which broadly speaking means pleasure. Now, the simultaneous square between Mercury and Pluto in the second and fifth houses speak to things like money and assets and resources and creativity. And so some dynamic happening here around things like financial concerns or considerations, assets and resource management, time, money, and energy, and the need for greater creative belonging or greater creative community, with Pluto in Aquarius in the fifth house comes to my mind. So some of those tensions are also informing whatever's happening in the realm of relationships. Now, finally, we go to Capricorn, last cardinal sign, and we see this full moon taking place in your fourth house, the place of home, family, roots, ancestry, your living environment, kind of a private or internal sphere of life that's less visible, the resting place, the roots of our chart, and the Mercury-Pluto dynamic happening across the 11th and 2nd. So what's interesting here is, I would say, first and foremost, the full moon is bringing a moment of greater depth and focus to the roots, to home and family, to what makes you feel rested or what gives you a private sense of sanctuary. But then there's this simultaneous level at which questions about the appropriate allies, groups, friends, communities, and the reality of things like money and finances and cultural and financial realities, let's call them, are somehow a co-present area of concern or focus that in juxtaposition is adding something to or bringing something up in relation to the sphere of home and family. So that's how I would connect that for Capricorns. Again, these are just really meant to kind of stimulate your awareness of the appropriate subjects and topics and how they might be connected. But it's so very personal that I just, it's always my hope that in conveying these things, that you'll sit with them and kind of reflect on them in a way that allows you to see their presence uniquely in your own life. So that is it for today. Finally, I want to show you what's on my altar. And I think this is one that feels really appropriate for our full moon. My wife helped me with this one. So what you're going to see there on the altar is goldenrod, and goldenrod is an herbal ally that is especially associated or aligned with Libra, and is particularly good at creating balance. It's particularly good at helping us to deal with things like allergies and inflammation, irritation, aggression. So it is a plant of balance, peace, and easing, especially things that are really inflammatory or irritating or aggravating. The reason that I thought it would be good to put this on the altar this week is because the one thing that's probably most indicated as a difficulty around this full moon would be the boiling, the irritation, the inflammation, the agitation mentally and emotionally would be the biggest thing to watch for. So I was telling my wife about this. She was like, use some goldenrod. It's very Libran. That's a simple way, by the way, that is a simple method for creating plant remediation. Just look for whatever's prominent, find a natural opposite to help create a bit more balance. All right, that's it for today. Stick around. Next, what you're going to hear is an informational video about the Year 1 program that begins November 8th. Come study with us. If astrology is a part of your daily life and it's a part of how you see and move through the world, there is nothing like having a deep, structured lineage to be a part of, a community to be a part of, where you can really immerse yourself in the language and deepen your understanding of it and become more intuitive and artful with how you use it. A lot of the time we take in astrology from so many different places that we're picking up the language, but we don't even realize it, but we're speaking like 10 different dialects. And I'm all about astrological exploration, but at a certain point, it really helps to have a focused community kind of lineage within which you can really alchemize your understanding, and it becomes a lot deeper and more profound, both in terms of how it transforms your life and how you can utilize it in a day-to-day manner. So I'm best at teaching. My programs are easily the best thing I've created at this point in my career. So come check it out. You'll hear about it next. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology, and it begins again this November. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the course, the format of the course, and how to register. So let's go ahead and get into it. What is this course about? Well, if you are not familiar, ancient Hellenistic astrology is the earliest and original form of horoscopic astrology. All of the subsequent forms and schools of astrology that have existed over thousands of years come from these philosophical and theoretical roots. And so what you're doing when you study Hellenistic astrology is you're going back to understand the why behind absolutely everything. Why were there ever such a thing as houses and signs in the first place? How were the planets ever assigned to rule various portions of the zodiac in the first place? How do you use the categories of essential dignity, and why were they ever created in the first place? If you're someone like me, you like to know the why behind things, because once you understand the why, then you know how to use things more intuitively. So really the point of Hellenistic astrology, in my opinion, is not so much about going back and becoming a traditional astrologer or just being traditional for the sake of being traditional, as much as it is about grasping the roots of the entire system and paradigm. When you understand those roots, you have more intuition and understanding, which allow for you to be much more artful and fluid in the way that you speak the language of astrology. We call this class Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic because while it is about going back to understand the philosophical, theoretical, technical roots of the tradition, it's also about fluidly bridging those things with modern astrology and all of its most unique contributions. For example, modern astrology has given us so much psychological depth and personal depth. And so in a modern astrological setting, you're going to get the ability to explore your own character, your own psychology, and you're going to be able to utilize astrology for a process of healing and personal transformation. But when you pair that with ancient astrology, and it's almost like predictive karmic analytics, you really have a full toolkit to work with. And so that's also a great mission of ours at Nightlight, is to bridge ancient and modern forms, which is why we call the program Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. So that's just a little kind of overview of the program. If you want to know more about the specifics of the curriculum and of the syllabus, what I encourage you to do is go over to nightlightastrology.com, click on the courses page, go to the first year course, scroll down, and you'll see this over 12 months you'll learn about. And here you're going to see more of a detailed breakdown of the curriculum itself. I can promise you that if you've studied astrology in modern context, but you've never gone back to the ancient roots, while some of these topics may look familiar to you and you go, oh, I've already learned about that. Unless you've studied them from the Hellenistic perspective, I guarantee that you are not going to be familiar with this content. Hellenistic astrology is mind-blowingly new and interesting for most people. And if you've never studied it, again, don't assume that anything on this list is something you're going to be familiar with. In that way, the program is really ideal for a variety of different people, and I'll say more about that in a second. So what is the format of the course? Let's go to that next. Scroll down and you're going to see that the course includes 30 online webinars that I lead throughout the year. Over the course of a year together, I have 30 classes that are broken into different units of material. In between those classes, we have breakout study sessions with your course director and 2 TAs. They're going to lead you through Q&A sessions and tutoring sessions to make sure that you have a lot of support in between major units of study. In addition, we also have an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions year-round and get an answer within a business day in the student forum, where a lot of people also connect and build community. Lots of people in that forum also develop like little meetup groups outside of class. That's very common in all of our programs. It's a very community-loving, warm space where anyone's also welcome. Throughout the course, you're also going to find that for every lesson, if you're just there as a hobby student, you can just listen to the webinars. They're all recorded for you. So if you can't make the live webinars, everything is housed on the website as recordings. I'd say about 40 or 50% of our students are going to be following along at their own pace, whereas the other half might be attending the live webinars. But it's really kind of, if you can attend a few and then 1 week you got to be gone, the recordings are always there. You have lifetime access to everything in the course, so it's not a big deal. For every lesson as well, if you're someone who wants to go really, really deep, maybe you have the intention to practice professionally, this course is set up with an optional certification exam at the end from our school, from our program. So you can, if you want to build that resume and develop the credentials from our programs, you can do that, but it's optional, so you don't have to. And outside of every lesson, we have recommended reading. We have supplemental bonus content, all of which is optional, but it's there for people who might want a lot more, whereas some people will take the webinars themselves, and that'll be plenty. So it's really flexible in that way. Also, this is one program within 4 years of curriculum that are meant to go together. And so most people who come through our first year program will end up taking our second year program, where we develop forecasting and prediction and transit tracking techniques. Our third year program, which is aimed at counseling and psychology. So psychological counseling skills is our third year program. And then the Oracle Within, which is our exploration of the philosophical, spiritual roots of the divinatory oracular tradition of astrology. So there's a lot of material there. We also have another 1 year program in horary astrology for some people who want to add that predictive tool to their toolkit. So there's just a lot of material at Nightlight that this class is actually just one part of, which can be taken standalone, or for some people, they get into it, they're going to love it. You're going to hang out with us for 3 or 4 years worth of content. This program is ideal for a number of different types of students of astrology. I'll say that for starters. So let's see here. I'll stop sharing this. So we have there's a profile of the typical students who come through our courses. One is going to be people who just want a very guided introduction to ancient astrology because you've never had it before. Maybe you're only familiar with modern, and you want that guided, structured approach to learning traditional for the first time. Also, people who are brand new to astrology in general, there's no better place to start than at the roots of the ancient foundations. So whether you're a total beginner or just a beginner to Hellenistic, this is a great place to start. If you are someone who's been around astrology for a long time, but you've never had a guided, structured approach to Hellenistic astrology, again, this is a great place to start. I promise you, Hellenistic is very different than what you're familiar with, and you're going to need a guided and structured approach at some point in time. I also think for people who are looking for a lineage, which means not just a bunch of information, but a practitioner-specific based approach where you get to see a practitioner work with clients. You get to hear how a practitioner has prioritized different techniques and why. You're going to get a structured, spiritually grounded focus at Nightlight as well, where if you're looking for someone who practices astrology but also values grounded, everyday spiritual practice, that's Nightlight. If you want a community that's been in the industry for a long time now, this is our 16th year of teaching programs and guiding students through trainings. So all of those things, if they matter to you, this is a great place to study. It's a warm community atmosphere. It's spiritually grounded. It's focused. It's academically rigorous. It's going to provide you the appropriate preparation for practicing professionally, especially if you go through all of our programs. But also for those who are just curious and love astrology for your own personal interests, this is going to be a great place for you to learn and grow and thrive and feel like you have a lot of support around you in the curriculum, the teachers, the community, as you're developing, what might just be a personal interest or spiritual hobby. So that is who it's ideal for. Finally, how you register. You go over to the website. I'm going to take you back there. And it's at the bottom of the first year page. You're going to find that the early bird rate is in effect until October 24th. You can save significantly off the cost of the course when you use the early bird rate, where you can pay in full, or use an early bird installment rate plan. Both are going to save you off significantly off the cost of the course. But also at Nightlight, it has always been our mission to make sure that astrological education is accessible for everyone. So please, if you are someone who would love to take this course, but maybe you can only afford a small amount of tuition per month, use the tuition assistance. It is there. All you got to do is plot, you fill out the little form, you tell us your situation. If you're on a fixed income, if you're on a limited income, if you're part-time, if you're in between jobs, if you don't make a lot and you're on that fixed budget, we understand. We don't want people to hurt themselves trying to study something that is spiritual that we feel should be very accessible for everybody. So if you're someone who could use a little help to make this program happen, for whatever reason, maybe you're a single parent or you're on disability or you're retired or you're on a fixed income, whatever the case is, use that tuition assistance. Also, people in other countries who have extreme, exchange rates. We get it. So just use the tuition assistance and we'll be glad to make sure that the price point is accessible. For us, as a spiritual topic, we're a business at the end of the day, but we believe that this is a spiritual topic. And so accessibility has been a part of our model for 16 years now. We've never not had one of our training programs with affordable sliding scale based prices for people who need it. So please take advantage of that. It's all there for you. I hope to see you in classes soon. And if you have any questions about the program whatsoever, direct them to us at info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see you all coming up here in November. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.